In this video, we're diving into budgeting. Whether this is your first experience with budgeting or you're looking to expand on your budgeting knowledge, this video is here to help. We'll build a real budget, explain the different ways to adjust your budget, and talk about ways to think about your future budget. Budgeting is all over. A simple Google search provides numerous websites, and YouTube does the same thing. They have tips and tricks, methods of budgeting, and strategies to follow. But a lot of it's worthless. This video is not going to do that because everyone is different. You, your neighbor, and Bill Gates all have different budgets and they're all going to look different. You can't just slap on a happy sounding name and expect everyone's budget to fit. Whether you're making $10 a month or 10 million, what I discuss will work for everyone. But why is this video different than others, you may ask? Because I'm not going to be using any catchy phrases. I'm not going to tell you how you should budget your lifestyle. I'm going to give you a strong base to start with and explain how you can adjust things to fit your lifestyle and your budget. You'll learn how to budget for yourself. When you break things down, budgeting is the same whether you're a business or a person. As I go through this, I'm going to use an Excel spreadsheet, but this can be done on a piece of paper as well. The difference is you'll just have lines instead of cells, and I'll show you how it would look on a piece of paper after each part. A business makes profit by taking revenue and removing costs. This is exactly what a person does as well. The only difference is that revenue is your income and costs are your expenses. And profit would just be your leftover income. Let's start with income. In cell A, we're going to put income, and most people's income comes from their job. But there are all sorts of ways that someone can make an income. I like to have a heading at the top to show which category we're in. So I'll underline it, but you can color code it or whatever you want to do. In A2, I'm going to put income, which is the income from my job. And let's say I make $3,000 a month. That goes in B2. Now, if you make income in other ways, you can put that in A3 and the amount would be in B3, and you just go down as you need. Now, for income, you're going to want to put your net income or your take-home income, the amount of money that goes into your bank account after your work benefits and your taxes are paid out. After I've added my income, I'm going to skip a line and we'll add expenses. In this case, we're in A4, and we'll keep this fairly simple and add on to it later. Now, there are two types of expenses, fixed and variable. Fixed are things like rent or mortgage or the minimum amount you have to pay on a loan. These do not change from month to month. So in A4, we're going to add fixed expenses or fixed or whatever makes sense to you. You can put I hate bills if you want to. This is your budget sheet, name it how you want to. And as you go through, make sure you're underlining or color coding or whatever you do to keep the headings consistent. It's good to have something to be able to quickly see where things are and how things are broken out. Now, what you put here is specific to you. The way to decide what to put here is if the expense stays the same every single month, put it here. If you can do something and it changes the amount, that's variable. Rent or mortgages are great examples of fixed expensive because when you sign your rent or your mortgage, it doesn't change until the end of your contract. Other things could be your cell phone or a loan, and we'll start putting down our fixed expenses in A5. In A5, I'm going to put rent, and in B5, I'll put the amount. Let's say my rent is $1,000. And let's also say that I have a car loan that is a minimum of $200 a month. In A6, I'm going to put car loan. In B6, I'm going to put $200. And we just move down like that until we have all of our fixed expenses listed. So let's say I pay $50 for a cell phone service and $150 for a student loan. That's good enough for fixed expenses. We're keeping this simple. Remember, this is specific to you. So add what you need to put down. Next is variable costs. And variable costs are costs that change each month or can change each month. If you can do something or something can happen and it changes the cost, that's a variable cost. Groceries are a variable cost because you can buy ramen for every single meal and spend something like $25 a month, or you can spend $1,000 a month because you bought the rarest steak in the world. In both scenarios, you can spend more or less, and that's what makes it a variable cost. So we'll skip a line and we're going to put variable costs again, whatever you want to put that makes sense and keeps it easy for you to remember. Gas is a variable cost because you can spend more or less for gas depending on how much you drive, and the price of gas can change. We're going to add restaurants, out with friends, and then we'll just have a miscellaneous category. You may have noticed we didn't add any amounts, and that's because variable costs are the most difficult to set up. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on them working to build it up. The reason they're so difficult is because they change from month to month. You need a starting spot to build from, and that's what we're going to start with. If you already have a budget going, this part doesn't apply as much to you. What you're going to want to do is look back at how much you've spent on these items. How much did your groceries cost each month? Or what about gasoline that you've spent? There are different ways to track variable costs, so you need to figure out which one works best for you. What I do is I take the maximum amount of the recent months, and that's the amount that I use. If I take a road trip and I spend a bunch of money on gas in 1 month, I'm not going to count that. But if I spend, say, $300 one month, $200 the next, then $250 and $275, I'll put $300. The reason I use the maximum amount is because you rarely hit that. It's a worst case scenario. Your discretionary income, which we'll talk about later, is always going to be lower than what you end up on your spreadsheet, which means you should have leftover income during most months. You can also take the average. In this example, you would have $256.25. That's a good way too. The worst way is taking the minimum amount, because unless something is changing to decrease that amount, you're going to struggle to hit that every single month. So we're just going to throw some numbers in here. The numbers don't matter. The idea and understanding how we do it is what matters. Pick whichever way you think is best and what makes sense to you. So we have all our numbers in here, and this looks pretty good. So let's do some math. In this how we're going to put in a formula. I'm going to type equals sum, SUM, left parenthesis, and then select all of the numbers in the income category. Then I'm going to do a right parenthesis and then type minus sum and a left parenthesis again, and select all the numbers in the fixed expenses category. And finally, I'll close that with a right parenthesis. Then I'll do minus sum, left parenthesis again, everything in the variable cost, and then right parenthesis. I'll hit enter, and that's going to give us our discretionary income. And Excel is really good at adjusting if things change over time in later months. On paper, you're going to have to pull out the trusty calculator. All it is your income minus your expenses. And if you want, you can separate out and find the fixed and variable expenses separate, so you have a better understanding of what goes into each one of them, and it makes the math a little bit easier. This number is your discretionary income, and you've probably guessed that it is the money left over after you've paid your taxes and your living expenses. Now let's stop here and talk about what other people say. They say you should add emergency savings or rainy day savings, or they say you should use the 50-30-20 method. Look, that's great for some people, but that doesn't work for everyone. And in fact, it probably doesn't work for most people. The reason I'm showing you this way is because it's so flexible. It works for everyone. Everyone's budget is different, so we shouldn't all use the same method or follow the same rules. This is a basic framework, and from here you move on and you change and add things as you need them as an individual. So let's talk about what you can do from here. Your discretionary income is either going to be positive, negative, or zero. And if it's zero, it's just luck. Because we have variable expenses, it will rarely be zero, so we're going to ignore what happens when it's zero. If it's negative, that means that you're spending more than you're making, and unless you have $1 million sitting around, I would suggest you make changes. The easiest and fastest option is variable costs. Buy cheaper food options. If you're spending time with friends, do something that's free or cheaper, or just a couple options to think about. Look at your variable costs and decide where you can cut down on things. Again, this is your budget. You need to decide. If you have to have Netflix to watch Stranger Things, keep it, but figure out where else you can make cuts. Where are you spending money that you don't need to spend money on? Now, you have two other options that are a bit more difficult. You can either increase your income, like getting a second job or working more hours. The third option is decreasing your fixed expenses, but this is difficult because if you're in a long term contract, it's hard to get out of those. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you how to live your life. You need to decide where you need to make cuts. But being negative will not last every single month, and you need to figure out how to make changes sooner rather than later. If you have a positive number in this spot, great. We have some options to discuss. We're going to make a spot below here that says discretionary income because we need to decide how you want to spend your discretionary income. You have two options, spending or saving. From there, you're going to have two more options. You can put all of your money into one of these four options, or you can split it and put a little bit in each one, whatever you think is your best option. We'll start with spending. You can either spend your discretionary income or you can use it to pay down debt. If you have debt, paying this down is always a good option. You can put more money into a loan, which is going to save you money down the road. I'll have another video on compound interest and why paying down debt is a good idea, but it's a bigger subject, so we don't have time to discuss it in this video. Your other spending option is buying things that you want. You can go buy a new purse or new shoes or whatever you want to buy now. And if you don't have debt, feel free to do this without any guilt. Now, as far as savings, there are two options here as well, and they're based on liquidity. Simply stated, liquidity is the speed at which you can take out your money. So you have long-term investments or short-term. Long-term would be things like another retirement account, or if you buy some bonds, things like that. It's a long list of things that we don't need to go over, at least not in this video. But long-term, what it basically means is it's going to take time to take it out, or there's going to be a penalty to take it out, or both. So if we look at the stock market is only open during the week and only 6.5 hours per day. So if it's the weekend or it's 11 o'clock at night, you can't sell your stock to take out your money. Stocks and bonds make you a lot more money than short-term accounts. Short-term would be something like a savings account or a checking account. If you need money, you drive to the ATM and you take out some money. But again, you barely make any money, if any, from these types of accounts. So there are advantages and disadvantages to each. If there weren't any disadvantages, we'd only be talking about one option. So your first decision is whether or how much you want to spend or save. Paying down your debt or saving helps you out in the long term. Paying down your debt means you have more money to save once your debt is paid off, and it saves you money because of interest. Short-term savings are good because you have emergency funds or you have money for larger purchases down the road. And long-term accounts are good for when you retire or later. How you should do it is up to you. There's different types of debt and different types of savings, so you kind of need to look and see how your debt and your savings are set up. But paying down debt or putting more money into savings is always a good option. If it's a long-term account, like an extra retirement account, or you're buying bonds, you should basically count on taking that money out as a last resort. So only use discretionary income you won't need for at least months, possibly years down the road. You can always turn your short-term savings into long-term savings, but it's much more difficult to turn your long-term savings into short-term savings. Like I said earlier, a lot of videos and a lot of sites tell you to break it down even further, but that's just to fill up the page. So this is the basic breakdown. You have four options and you can break it down from there. If you want to break short-term savings into an emergency fund and a trip fund for a big cruise you want to take, do that. That may make it easier for you to track. Either way, it's just short-term savings that you're breaking down a little bit further. If you have stocks and bonds, break them out if you want, but there's still long-term savings. Again, do what is best for you. Just understand what type it is and why you're doing it or why it's working the way it is. And that brings us to what to do now. The first thing is to like and subscribe so you can see more videos from this channel. The second one is, once you have your first budget done, you can copy everything over, accept your variable costs, and you're ready for your second month. From here, you'll just need to add your variable costs and make any adjustments that you need to make. If you're, say, a recent college graduate, you have to start paying on your loans eventually, so have that budgeted in for the month that starts. Then you're gonna put it in fixed expenses. As you move through your budget, look at trends and plan ahead. If you start to see your variable costs going up, figure out why they're going up. The more you do it, the easier it becomes and the more things start to make sense. So think about things you want to save for, a new vehicle or a vacation, or maybe you want to add more to your retirement accounts. And think about things you need to pay for now. Paying down your debt is always a good idea. But make sure that if you have enough in your budget, you buy some things that are gonna make you happy now. This video is to explain how to build a budget and allow you to build your budget how you want or need to. It's a broad overview of a budget. This has everything you need to build a budget without all of that extra fluff. We can go into details, but that's not what this video is for. Budgeting is difficult, but once you have the basics down, it becomes much easier. But budgeting is a never-ending process. You're always expanding, always learning, and things are always changing in your budget. Your budget now compared to, say, 10 years ago, and compared to in the future 10 years from now, all of those budgets are going to be much different from each other. So being able to adjust is very important. And if you're confused about something or something's just not clear, make a comment or ask a question in the comment section and somebody will be happy to help you out. So thanks for watching, and again, like and subscribe.